Cool. Okay, this is episode 2 of a social distancing podcast. My name is Sid.
And I'm Arushi Rai.
And today we're joined by our guest, Aiswarya.
Aiswarya?
Do you want to talk about your guest?
Yeah, so Aiswarya is my high school friend. We met in tennis, or probably when I was a freshman in high school, and I was taking this class called STEM Research. And we've been friends ever since, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. And Aiswarya is a software engineer at Uber Freight. Is there anything you'd like to say about yourself?
As Arushi said, we've known each other probably for 8 years. That's a long time. And I currently live in San Francisco. Almost finishing a year as a software developer.
Oh my God, it's almost a year. It's summer already.
It is almost.
That's crazy that I feel like you just started at Uber.
But right now you're doing work from home at your parents' place in Cupertino, right? Right. So,
indeed.
So today's theme is about quarantine, work from home, and how food delivery companies come into that. What food delivery companies are bringing into the table, how we're adapting to the situation.
And whether they're actually going to be profitable from this. Right.
How we are innovating, changing the workforce. Pretty much talking about the business side of the whole thing also. The reason why we got you as a guest specifically was because you work at Uber, which also has Uber Eats, and we really want to know your opinion just because we know that Uber is also gathering some of their employees to work a bit on Uber Eats, and we want to know your opinion on things, but we also want to know your perspective on what you can say, what you can't say. We just want to know what you can say, and we just want to know whether what we think is going on is matched with the reality of what's going on behind the scenes, really.
To the best of your knowledge. Because you do work for Uber Freight, which is a different division. It's almost like a different startup, right?
Yes, it is quite removed, but
before we get started,
we hear through that.
Before we get started, just want to know how your work from home is going.
It has been really smooth. Everything, I want to say that all the meeting, as far as communication and projects go, we had a lot of alignment starting before work from home began. So it was very smooth to just continue executing on everything. The deadlines were not really changed. No one has really seen that much of a overall big picture workflow change. There were a few additional projects that were added for COVID support.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some more tighter deadlines, but other than that, people keep the same hours. We have a few more extra stand-ups, which I feel like has been beneficial, just to spend some time talking with others on what you're working on. But other than that, everyone has been really helpful. We debug over Zoom, where pretty much it's very similar to being with other people. The one thing that you kind of don't have is just listening to other people's general chit chat and conversations, which actually I'm surprised did add a lot. I think even though I know now exactly what someone is working on by their 2-minute updates, just hearing them complain about something, you pick up things about different issues that, it's you kind of miss it.
That's very true.
But
I don't miss the commute to work, but I do miss the random banter in the office and just the random things, or food being downstairs randomly sometimes, and you just get free pizza, or your coworkers are just trashing on each other. It's just the little things that add to the experience that you won't ever get from work from home, but it is what it is right now. It's not.
Work from home really strips out the social experience of it, and really makes it you're just there to be an employee to the company.
Right. Have you been ordering a lot of food
I haven't, but I know that a lot of so Uber, as an Uber employee, you get about 200 credits a month
That's nice.
to spend on your discretion on any Uber product. So it's actually interesting. Uber has been trying to volunteer, have employees volunteer to donate their credits to COVID relief funds and so forth. But there's also been a responding kind of counterclaim by a lot of people that it's better for them to use their credits to support the local restaurants and kind of keep them, afloat, because it's pretty challenging right now for a lot of restaurants to still match demand. And also early on, actually, interestingly enough, what Uber did was they signed up a lot of Uber employees outside of Uber Eats to help get new restaurants on board. So there's actually a whole process that I wasn't aware of at all initially, but that a restaurant has to go onto the Uber site, create their menu, all sorts of other pricing information, and fix up some sort of a contract or deal. And there was a huge flood of new small, medium-sized businesses, restaurants that weren't on Uber Eats that initially went through this process, and they asked employees across Uber to help the sign-up process and audit and validate all the information. So they've been putting a lot of effort into generally getting restaurants on the platform, making sure it's easy to use, and allowing employees to use their credits to support these new restaurants on the platform.
That's really cool. I mean, from the perspective of like this app user, you don't realize, you always see Uber as this very tech heavy company, and you don't realize that there's this whole operational cost that goes into it, and it's very manual. You have to onboard each restaurant, you have to negotiate what the commission rate is going to be, and also you need to fix their pricings, because some restaurants, they actually do a markup of their pricings, and that's something that I'll go over. They actually make their prices higher on these platforms to sort of compensate for the high commission fees. But generally that practice is discouraged by like these food apps.
Right. But that also really tells you about the technology that Uber owns, like the configuration technology that they have for these restaurant owners to configure their menus and stuff. I was really impressed by that when I heard about that from you. But yeah. Do you wanna?
What about you? How's your week been?
My week? I mean, my first call every morning is at 9 a.m. So I wake up at 8:50. I brush my teeth. I give the cat a meal, and then I jump on the call until sometimes 10, until sometimes 10:30, until sometimes 2 o'clock. And then I just work. Sometimes we cook, sometimes we order boba, sometimes we do Uber Eats, sometimes it's Chowbus. It depends on
yeah, so you've been using a lot of Chowbus.
Yeah.
How is that, like, what made you switch to Chowbus?
Boba. I mean, we were just craving for boba, and Uber Eats doesn't really have any boba options, and we know a lot of boba places, but Uber Eats just doesn't list them. Uber Eats only lists a bunch of places that are high end, and when you order a boba at $8, you end up paying probably like $14-15 with Uber Eats. So most of the times I order with Uber Eats, but sometimes it's just not worth it. So then I went to Chowbus. I saw this vast list of options, and I was just like, this is like the obvious option for boba at least, and for Asian food. So
have you heard of Chowbus?
I haven't. Is it a regional thing?
Interesting.
So it's a new sort of app. I know it's very popular here in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know where it originated from?
No, I didn't.
I think it's a New York company. So it's a small startup. It's also food delivery based, but basically it's targeted at ethnic food. So, and when you say ethnic, right now it's primarily for Asian food, but it does have like a few Indian spots, and then it has like this Caribbean place. But it's like the best ethnic food that you can find, and it's handpicked by people who are actually Asian, like as in Korean people picking the best Korean restaurants.
Yeah.
So it's it's hard to get on the platform, but when you are as a user, you know that these are the best places, that they're actually very authentic. And it's also really low cost. They don't have much markup. Their delivery fee is $2.99, or service fee. Their service fee is like $2.99, and if you pay for they have a membership model, so you pay $9.99 per month, and then you don't have to pay any delivery fees, which also makes you order way more. Yeah, and the first month is free, and they have like this really awesome reward service.
But I think in terms of features, also the best feature that I enjoy is you can order from different restaurants.
Oh yes.
And then you can order boba, and then if I think it's like for each restaurant they choose a bunch of restaurants in the surrounding. So let's say I'm ordering from this one restaurant on Halstead, and on the way the driver will be driving by this other restaurant down the street anyway, so I can order from both these restaurants, so I can combine the appetizer, the main course, and the dessert from the same street in terms of restaurants, and then all these meals from all these different restaurants come from one driver, and at the end of the day I'm only paying one delivery fee and one service fee. It's not combining all these delivery and service fees together and waiting different times for different drivers to come by.
Yeah.
It's such a simple thing, but hey, we thought that we peaked in terms of food delivery service.
It was actually founded by two college students in New York.
Yeah, I mean, with GoPuff and things like Chowbus, there's always those niches that those companies discover, and you're just like, this could be a thing. And yeah, now I'm using all of them, and it's crazy good. It's a good time to be in the United States right now in terms of
how long have they been around? Do you know?
I know that they've been around for at least 2 years. I don't know when they were founded, but it's newer than like the most recent ones, like Uber Eats. Uber Eats was 2014. What else? Postmates was like actually one of the first ones in the modern era, 2011. GrubHub was old. GrubHub started in like 2004.
And it adapted itself into becoming a food delivery service company.
Yeah, so actually it's interesting. When we think of food delivery services, there's actually two types. One is an aggregator, and the other is a new delivery. So the new delivery ones are like DoorDash, Postmates. They supply their own drivers, and they actually partner with the restaurants. Whereas GrubHub, they were basically bringing in customers. They were really functioning as a advertisement for these different restaurants, and the restaurants, they would take care of their own like delivery. So that's like targeting people or companies like Papa John's, which already has its own fleet of drivers and cars. Also like let's see, I just remember Papa John's off the top of my head, but it's like really companies like those big chains. Cool. But ultimately they had to adapt to the market and bring in their own drivers. I mean, initially they had started as just like posting company or restaurants menus. Did you know, like GrubHub, they were started by literally like the founder walking around the streets of Chicago, grabbing menus, physical menus from restaurants. Yeah, it's a Chicago company, back in 2004. And he grabbed like menus from restaurants, and he'd like type it all out, and he'd be calling these restaurants and saying, hey, do you like, I'm over here, would you be delivering to me? How much would that be? Blah 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 blah. And that's how he would like mark the boundaries of like where they could deliver to.
It's a real hustle.
Yeah, they really put their blood, sweat, and tears into it, and you really see that now. Like they know what their business is, and they're actually profitable. They're the only food delivery company that's profitable. They're really famous for the message that they sent last year in October. They wrote this like 22-page business. What do you call like your quarterly like report that you send? Earnings report. They basically sent a letter to their stockholders, and they said, food delivery is not going to be profitable. Where we are profitable is from like advertisement, outsourcing handling the logistical aspects for the restaurant. So their main money isn't even coming from the actual act of food delivery. That's just bringing the restaurants in, providing them some value.
Damn.
But the actual business itself is not profitable. But you see their service, this might actually like hurt them in the long run, I think, because you see their business and you actually use their app and it's very basic. Grubhub's app is not the best. They're technologically very behind because they haven't invested much on that aspect of it. They're so focused on the advertisement, the like extracting money from the restaurant side that they haven't put much investment into the food delivery aspect. And if they don't have that, then there's not like the total value that they bring in is very low and they're not going to retain their users. Another reason why they're actually saying that food delivery is not profitable is because there's just so many competitors and there's always someone with more cash to burn. So people or companies, I keep on referring to companies as people, but startups with more cash to burn, they can offer rewards to entice customers. And customers right now, like you and I, we're gonna go for whatever gives us the best price.
Yeah.
There's no brand loyalty.
$100 in free deliveries by Postmates. It literally took the shine out of everyone for like 2 years when all the YouTubers were promoting their promo codes or whatever. That was crazy, but yeah, you're right.
Exactly. And if people are hopping from different platforms, these companies, they need more and more cash to actually improve their service, because there's only so long a customer will go without like the quality being really high. Like if you keep on getting your food as soggy and wet, you're going to stop using that. That's going to leave a bad taste in both like the platform that you're using, say if it was your first time.
Yeah.
That way then the reward has gone to waste, like the company had invested in you, and you're never going to use that app again.
Aishwarya, have you ever had a bad experience with food delivery?
I personally haven't, but that could also be because I have not the highest user of it, but I can speak to one of the things that Arushi just brought up regarding the cash infusion. It's something that we've heard a lot. So primarily because right now, Uber Eats has been, it's a huge part of Uber, but it's definitely, as Arushi mentioned, it's not getting us any profits right now. And also another thing that Arushi brought up was that there's a lot of competition. So one of the things that Uber has done recently actually was to try to make like the strategic move that in any region that we are not the first or second largest player in that market, we will leave actually. And this was a move done primarily because of this, Uber Eats left India, and it was just in order to say that we should fight the battles where we think we are first or second. And other than that, it's because it's one of the main reasons they said that in Uber Eats India was that it's a completely different food delivery game. You asked about service, right? That a lot of people would be fine just paying one person to go and pick up food right away for them, instead of having this one person who picks up from different places and tries to, combine an order. At that point, that cost is just not worth it for someone when they could find a local person to do it for them cheaper, right? So it's a completely different market in terms of the amount of time people really wait and the cost associated with that time. And because we didn't really have that market picture determined properly, and some other local businesses, I think Zomato, I'm not 100% sure on this, but is one of the largest players in India right now, and they have a slightly different model where they will, as soon as you ask, they dispatch like one person to go get it and actually place the order for you when they get to the restaurant, and then bring it back, so that you don't have like cold food or
Oh, interesting.
so on and so forth. So yeah, it's more of a question of having more tailored solutions for the actual locale that you're in because of this competition and different preferences.
Right. Also, speaking of competition, the thing is, another reason why people use different apps is because you can only find that restaurant over there. Like the reason why I've had to use DoorDash is because Noodles and Co. and Chipotle is on there exclusively.
Right.
So, then I have to switch over. But the thing is, all these food delivery services, they realize that that's also where the money is. Like, you got to sign these exclusive contracts. And they tried to, but then, like, I think McDonald's had first signed with, I think it was Uber Eats. McDonald's had first signed with Uber Eats an exclusive contract. Then they negotiated out of it because they realized also customers are just going on every app. So they're limiting their own exposure by limiting themselves to one app. And it doesn't make sense for a business or a restaurant to stay on one food delivery services app if it's going to limit their own exposure, right? Since that's what they're paying the commissions and all that markup for that exposure. So they want to maximize it as much as possible. But on the food delivery service end, they're like, oh no, like that's one of the upper hands that they have, exclusivity. So what you have is you have a whole lot of competition and you don't have much of a way in between them to set them apart. They're all offering the same things, rewards. They're all offering like the same restaurants. So why would you want to switch between them?
It's very interesting. I think with the isolation thing too, in terms of some like in Virginia, for example, my friend Matt, who goes to University of Virginia, he never experienced Uber Eats before he came to Chicago. So then when he downloaded the app, I remember we were doing the internship together, and I had to run him through like how the app worked and that whole experience, and that was very interesting to me because we're all in the United States, but even like from state to state, it differs in experience.
It's the first movers, but slowly that's actually shifting. So the reason why in Virginia he's more familiar with GrubHub is because GrubHub had acquired Seamless. Seamless started in 1999. It's actually one of the first movers, and they were the first deliveries, like food delivery service. So they had started doing that before even GrubHub, but then they got acquired by GrubHub. And now since they've merged, all of their Seamless operations in the East Coast is now under GrubHub. So that's why they have a stronghold. But that's shifting because in the month of March, DoorDash used to have 39% of the market share, and they went up to 45%. And the biggest loser in the market share was GrubHub. They used to have 30% of the food delivery market share, and now they're down to 25%.
What's that?
So they lost 5%. They're not offering the same rewards. They don't have the same cash to burn through because they're a public company, and they're operating with the Midwest business model. You don't pump in a ton of VC money. You're using the money that you know you can like generate back.
Right.
And that's also why they're profitable right now. But in the long term, that's going to kill them because even though like VCs had spread out their money between DoorDash, Postmates, and all these other delivery services, if one wins, like DoorDash, if it captures most of the market share, like right now it's at 45%, then after everybody else, like after the competition dies out, DoorDash will make that money back because they're the only ones that are left. As soon as competition is gone, food delivery should be profitable.
As soon as competition is gone?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because if one food delivery company is doing really, like right now it's an equal battle. You don't know who's going to make it to the top. Right. It's leaning towards DoorDash, but you don't know who's going to make it to the top. So people have a reason to invest in like all these different like food delivery startups. But as soon as one starts to like differentiate themselves, then it's over. Who's going to invest in the other, like in a new food delivery startup that needs to start at zero again?
I see.
Because this is a like multiple decade effort.
Right. Interesting.
With lots of cash burnt through.
Okay. I want to switch things up and move to some of the advantages and drawbacks that those food delivery services have been bringing to the COVID-19 situation. Um, let's start with advantages. On your side, Aishwarya, have you noticed any advantages that you've seen at least Uber Eats provide to its customers, to restaurants? I mean, you've stated a few before, but in general, have in terms of from people behind the screens that are actually making the app and providing those services, is there any internal discussion as to how to provide more help to those people?
Sure. I can speak to one of the things I know we've been doing locally, specific to COVID, is that Uber Eats made one of the first decisions to cut commissions. So as of right now, I don't know the exact extent of the region, but at least in the San Francisco Bay Area, Uber is not charging commissions for small to medium-sized restaurants. And this was a move made, I think it was the first one to make this decision. A little later on, this city, the mayor of San Francisco, issued I don't know if it's an executive order or some sort of mayoral proposition, might not be the right term, but
I think it's executive order.
That all restaurant delivery services had to cap their commissions at 15%, and this raised a lot of back and forth because it primarily raised the question of who's going to be fielding the burden of this. Are the restaurants the service providers who now at this moment generally charge around on the order of 30% commissions, are they now going to be not serving these restaurants that they no longer can get this markup from? So essentially saying, we're no longer going to be profitable on these restaurants because we can't do the 30% commission, and thus not include these small, medium-sized businesses. Is that the way this is going to be offloaded, or are they just going to take a loss? Because at some point, everyone knows that the margins that these providers, right, food delivery services get is not very high, even with the commissions. So it was a huge kind of argument of, is it a play that each service provider has to decide by itself, saying that this is what we are willing to put forth to be able to support the most restaurants given our current kind of, economic structure of where we're generating revenue? Or is it possible for, the government to come in and say that we are mandating like a 15% cap? And at what point is this just going to mean that a service like Uber will say, okay, at a 15% commission, these restaurants, we just can't support them anymore because we're not going to incur losses in order to continue to provide these benefits.
So is the cap is the cap just for this COVID-19 time, or is it like permanent?
No, it's right now. Yeah, it's definitely during this relief effort. I don't know, like I think it's not. There's no like clear end date per se, but
and the cap is for like
as far as the implementation goes.
Is the cap for like all restaurants in the San Francisco area?
Sorry, I think it froze.
Oh, I'm saying, is the cap for all the businesses in the San Francisco area?
Yeah, so it's a cap for all, like DoorDash, GrubHub, all food delivery
I meant restaurants. Sorry,
can't charge more than 50% commission.
Okay.
Sorry.
I meant to say all the restaurants in San Francisco, not differentiating between small or large business.
Oh yeah. I don't think it applies to chains. It's only for what classifies as a small to medium sized restaurant.
I think that's interesting. I think that like if the entire city is making that move, the advantage clearly lies on the city, right? Mm-hmm. Like the city has a bigger say because a food delivery service is not gonna drop all those different like restaurants, even if they're small or medium, because they're still bringing in business.
Right.
People are looking for those different restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
When I go on Uber Eats, I'm not looking for McDonald's.
Right. I mean, I mean, that's like that's based on personal preference. That's like probably just a you thing. You don't usually eat at McDonald's.
But
either.
when you look at the price of like McDonald's on Uber Eats or any other, like mainly Uber Eats, the markup is just so high. And when you know the cost of what McDonald's is actually worth, it doesn't make sense to have these like large chains that are also like really cheap, supposed to be really cheap, being paid for at a really like high price just because you're ordering through this app.
Right. I'm not sure whether McDonald's is still doing drive-through and all of that, and especially as someone who cannot drive, it's like it's just a convenience at that point. The extra $7 on top of my $8 Big Mac, that's just like the price of convenience, and that's also like capping on how much I'm consuming a Big Mac myself. But that's just how I choose to go for McDonald's when I'm on Uber Eats.
But actually, when you're looking at commission fees, it's a fixed percentage of each order. And if people are making small orders, like they're just trying to feed themselves, because usually like the amount a person can eat is just so much, right? Like if it's under a certain bar, they're still not going to be making much from commission.
You mean the company?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, would you agree with that? I feel like you should become.
And then ultimately what that does is that you see this like really immense markup on your individual order. First of all, you get fined like that small order fee. Uber Eats is actually the only one that does that like small order fee. You have that, then you have the service fee, then you have taxes. Taxes actually vary across different platforms for the same region.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I actually have a chart over here. Somebody ordered 2 Subway sandwiches, 6-inch, and the sales tax for that, like on GrubHub, was $1.20. And then on DoorDash it was $1.29, and on Postmates it was $1.33. So it's varying across different platforms. But ultimately what I'm saying is, if you're having a 91% markup on a small order, like double the cost, how much are consumers willing to go and pay the price of convenience for this to be sane in the long run? Because you also see meal kits coming in too. So if you really want convenience, going to your fridge is going to be easier.
Right, as we saw this week. But I just want to know on your side, what's the discussion based on that? In terms of how we hike up the convenience fees and the service fees and all the tax prices from Uber Eats perspective, just because for our side, from our perspective, it doesn't make any sense, even though as consumers we are still using those services. But from people that work there, what's like the logic behind going through those decisions?
Sparsely, but we use it sparsely.
I used to use it a lot before, so yeah.
So I mean, I don't have that much insight into how Uber Eats has decided to do its commission like breakup, and the pricing structure. That I think it's something that's also still largely being determined / figured out with various promotions. I know the one thing though that you mentioned is a lot of times companies like Uber Eats are largely trying to do growth first. It's only been a recent push where we're trying to make sure that everything is margin. So if you've ever seen a situation where initially we take like a lot of put in promotions, have low service fees, that doesn't necessarily mean that's sustainable for the business. And whenever it hikes up, that's usually a few years later on where the company now has to start making profits. So
but then,
I think, as I said, so pretty much I can't speak exactly to how the pricing structure is done, only to say that a lot of times it's still being figured out, and it's not profitable even when it seems reasonable to consumers.
But the issue is, even with these high markups, it's still not profitable. And then you have like Grubhub, which is profitable. It charges a service fee of $1.29 for this order that like primarily costs like $11.90. Oh yeah, also the prices are different on each platform. So Grubhub, the price of 2 turkey sandwiches that are 6 inches is $11.98, whereas like on DoorDash, Postmates, and Uber Eats, it's $14.78. So there's already that fluctuation on the item's price. But then when you look at service fees, Grubhub, which is profitable, has a service fee of $1.29, whereas Uber Eats has a service fee of $2.22, and Postmates being the highest, having $2.42. So I think these high service fees, they're not sustainable. You also see that with DoorDash also gaining like a lot of the market share because their service fee is relatively low. It's at $1.20 for this order. So you have double the service fee for Postmates and Uber Eats compared to like Grubhub and DoorDash.
And when was this taken? This data?
This was
if you have it.
This was 2019.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm honest.
Yeah, I think the one thing I can add to this. Sorry, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Oh,
go
definitely.
ahead.
Pop in.
Yeah, the one thing I can add to this is that I know, like, as far as rides go, that we recently also made a shift on the pricing structure where initially this was from the city's move to AB5, where it says that contractors now have to be able to determine their own prices and, so that they're not employees. And because of that, Uber used to do a system where they would tell you your price beforehand, right? So I could say that I want, as a rider, if I just put in from here to San Francisco, they would tell me before I even selected the drive that it would be, let's say, $40, right?
Interesting.
But now Uber moved to giving it a range. So it's like it'll be from between $38 to $45 per se. And the main reason they did this is that now this allows for them to compute based off the actual number of miles and time that the driver ended up driving, and then charge you based on that. So it's more of it's a cost structure, pricing structure that's based, it's like a rate per mile or hour, dollars per minute. I think one of the two combination of that, of the time and the miles driven, so that it's a direct proportion for the driver to say that if I put in this many hours, drive this many miles, this is about how much I should be making. Whereas before, it was more of a black box saying that this ride should take generally this amount of time, but let's say there's a lot of traffic. Now the driver isn't fairly compensated.
Right.
So I think a lot of these small differences in markup or revenue commission is largely just based on like how they're charging per unit, and computing this price. It's not necessarily that like one company's across the board putting a higher markup on everything. It's just in this example.
Yeah, it's partially due
to
Uber's algorithm of like having surge pricing, which actually makes their service fee fluctuate. So sometimes you can get like a crazy high service fee, or like sometimes you get a lower service fee, but generally it's high across the board. That's interesting to know. So we're going to be paying more for rides now.
Well, I hope Uber keeps bouncing those rewards towards me. I have no clue why I've been getting rewards before the coronavirus thing happened. I've been getting rides for like $2 or $3, and it was just the time of my life to just travel cheaply until the corona thing happened. And now it's like zero Uber, no Uber traveling.
But then when you think about it, like drivers are making nothing.
I have a question about that, so unrelated to fast food delivery. when Uber offers discounts on rides and stuff, do they offer let's say I get a 50% discount on the ride. Does Uber pay for the other 50% when I'm paying for my 50% of it to the driver? Do you know about that?
Oh yes. They have to, any promotion that we do is not felt on the compensation to the driver.
Okay. Yeah, because
it's all like distribution of, money on our end.
I see.
Yeah, because I was very worried about that for a quick minute, but that's good to hear. I just want to shift towards kind of the end of a podcast. In terms of innovation in the food delivery services, I just want to know what's your prediction on how this industry can be innovative or can be brought into this other sphere. I know usually successful businesses, when I've seen them, it's like they're trying to solve a problem. So before you see the problem, you can't really predict what the next problem is going to be for these food delivery services to tackle. But I just want to know, like, from your perspective, what's your gauge on where food delivery service companies are going?
Oh wow, that's a big question.
Think of a company idea right now.
Huh?
I said, think of
Where
a company.
are they going? That is.
Where do you think that where's like one aspect of profitability or one thing that you want to see in a food delivery service that they don't really have right now?
I see. Interesting. I think it's, at least as far as Uber Eats is concerned, I think they're trying to better solve the whole question of how you get your food, like not just per se as restaurants, but also looking into groceries and looking into also the idea of restaurants that want to brand differently than the entire restaurant. So it's just trying to figure out different models that will work the best. So with the last one, it's, if let's say a restaurant has this one dish that they want to advertise or brand by itself, and no longer they can create like a new kind of, not platform, but a standalone entity to market those products and brand them differently from the entire restaurant. Let's say you're Applebee's or something, and there's this one dish that can stand alone and brand on its own. I know Uber Eats has been looking into being able to allow restaurants to do that. And it's just like different, and also a lot of things with groceries, how to best make sure that people get any food delivery, whether it's from a restaurant, whether it's a specific kind of food product, like a dish, like not specifically tied to the restaurant's brand. And with groceries, I think it's mostly just, your food consumption habits and who can kind of get that whole picture tailored the best for the consumers, kind of my take on it. As I said, it's very different even from region to region. What are consumer habits in one place would be very different in, let's say, a different country. Mm-hmm. And for all of these competitors that are trying to gain share, not just in like the Bay Area, but also in Chicago, where people might do something else, in India, where they're just used to different norms. I'm not sure. Like we've definitely seen the drawbacks of companies that just try to use the same model in different areas, and it doesn't really work out. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you do need to grow, because otherwise there isn't the opportunity to get, revenue just from tackling these new markets.
Right.
I think there's one,
my 2 cents, but it's a very big question.
One really interesting point that you said over there, like getting into the grocery business. My worry is that when these tech companies, they use their like tech power to like over personalize and focus on like this one aspect of the business, when the other aspect of that business is so primitive. Like when you look at groceries, it's a very manual task. You go, you pick up like the actual thing, mm-hmm. instead of like having just warehouses that you pull from. That's also where I think like GoPuff is really interesting because they have their own like warehouses and they have a real opportunity to automate that process.
Own drivers too.
Yeah.
I was very impressed with GoPuff, even though the app isn't the best. But in terms of their business model, I'm not sure if it's sustainable, but as a customer, I'm very satisfied with the service. But in terms of what you were saying, where where Uber Eats is trying to make some of those dishes be like something that is not related to the branding of the house, for example. Isn't that kind of like the concept of ghost? Was it
Ghost kitchens.
Ghost kitchens.
That's a little bit different because you still have the branding of the whole restaurant.
Let's define ghost kitchen first.
So a ghost kitchen is a restaurant without the actual seating of a restaurant. So it's this giant facility. You can think of it as a co-working space for restaurants, and they can go in and they can make their dishes, and they work in conjunction with these third-party delivery services and have their food delivered out without having the huge cost of maintaining the restaurant. Unfortunately, you'll see a decline in the actual dine-in experience because the real like problem in the restaurant business is the whole part where you're renting this $18,000 per month facility that'll be occupied for only a certain percentage of the day. It's heavily underutilized, and you're paying for that cost constantly when you can just take the food part of the business and people can just order from an app.
Would you say hole in the wall restaurants are kind of like ghost kitchens, or not really?
Not really, because you still have that like face-to-face interaction with customers, but they could easily transform into a ghost kitchen.
Right.
You'll see a loss in jobs with that because then you just need a chef and someone to package it. But that's definitely what the market is shifting towards, having these ghost kitchens. And actually, Travis Kalanick, the former CEO and founder of Uber, has founded a company called Cloud Kitchens.
Has he founded it, or is he funding it?
Funding? Oh, I didn't know he was funding. I thought he started. No. He started a new. Wait, do you know? Our Uber source.
Travis Kalanick has completely removed himself from Uber. I'm not exactly sure of the progress. I've heard about this too, and I don't know if this is encroaching on Uber Eats or. Yeah, I'm not. I can't speak to the. How involved or not involved. I know Kalanick definitely has left Uber, Sport, everything.
But
he's like no longer involved.
I think he founded this company, and he got funding from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. I've heard that.
What's this shady investment? Yeah. Why from Saudi Arabia? Who are those? Whose pocket?
He's sort of banned from like Silicon Valley right now. Wouldn't you say? Like he's so infamous. Would any VC in like the Valley? Yeah. Would any VC in the Valley invest in him right now? Would that ever be a good look?
I am not sure. I can't tell you.
Well, honestly, I don't know.
I mean, he has to go like wherever. I mean, Saudi Arabia is super rich, right? They're ready to fund things. You also saw that with SoftBank. SoftBank is very ready to fund things until now.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to, because he doesn't have a good record in leading a company, but he has a good record in starting a company. Like, that's the whole entrepreneurial spirit, right? Being the executive at a company, that's a different thing from starting a company and getting it to a successful level. But talking about the founder of Uber is like a conversation for another day. But I do think it's very interesting that he is peaking his nose. I do think it's very interesting that he's like peeking into ghost kitchens.
Do you think he's trying to make a Steve Jobs move?
Exactly. That's what I was about. I was coming to that point just because from Aishwarya's point, Uber is trying to find this in between kitchens and ghost kitchens, where they're trying to have restaurants serve this one dish that's disconnected from the restaurant and its brand. And him on the other end is like, no, this is like a ghost kitchen. It's like You know how when you go to certain supermarkets, there are those containers that have no brands and no labels on them. It's like those restaurants with no labels, no brands. It's like you're just buying.
But that's not what a ghost kitchen is. Like those are actual like businesses. Those are actual like restaurants.
So it's still gonna be.
They have their own packaging. They have their own branding. They just don't have in-store seating. And they might have a ghost kitchen and in another restaurant. Like in London, this is really popular, where they have a restaurant and then they have like a delivery like radius that they can deliver to. Then they'll go in another popular area, start a ghost kitchen over there, or like in an existing like facility. They'll expand. They'll basically double the size of their delivery radius by operating in this other area.
Right.
But that also has its own challenges because the consumer doesn't really know like where their food's coming from. They don't know whether it's coming from the restaurant itself, like the physical facility, or the ghost kitchen. And then when their order goes wrong, they contact the restaurant, and then the restaurant owner has to tell them, hey, like this wasn't made here. Like I don't know what went wrong.
Right.
Or I can't trace your order. And that's where big problems come in right now.
Well,
but it's an interesting area.
Yeah, it's still something for the future.
I wanted to add one area of like innovation that I see is you see people becoming a lot more health conscious right now. And ordering out, you always get really oily food. And there's only so long when we'll go while we're... Well, actually going back, the whole food industry is known to be like sort of unprofitable for like people's eating needs. So like people can only eat so much. They have a limited capacity for even dining out as well and actually physically eating. That's why groceries, there's such thin margins. That's also why like the portion size has gone up more. Our capacity for eating, like that's been like advertised to us, has increased. We eat a lot more than we should. Like in most places. Right. And that's how the food industry remains like sort of stable. So what you see is that people, like at some point there's going to be a reckoning in your health. And if you continue to have restaurants that, if all the restaurants that are on your page, if there's no way to differentiate between what is, what's healthy and what's not, people will start leaving the platform. So I think a real area of innovation is adopting like different diets. Like say if you are on a keto diet, then like they'll show you restaurants that are keto. But that, because this whole like food delivery game is so complex because there's so many different parties, it depends on which restaurants are springing up. So I see like having these ghost kitchens, there's more like healthy foods that can be opened up that don't have to have the uptick cost of actually operating a physical business in like these pricey areas, which will actually go and consume these foods. They can operate at a lower cost, pay lower rent, and then also be differentiated on this platform where people can go and they're like, yeah, I know my health won't suffer if I eat from here.
Do you think that, you know how...
That's really interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was going to put the Arushi trademark logo onto that onto that diet idea, just because... But my concern with diets is that diets are kind of like fashion now. It's kind of like trends going back and forth. The carnivore diet, for example.
You can have different diets on there.
Right, yeah. But that's a really interesting idea. I would love to see an app that would...
Even just basic nutritional information. When you look at your app, you don't see any nutritional information.
You don't? I think you...
At least on Chowbus.
Oh, yeah, no, I think you do now, because restaurants have to provide these. I think that's like... That's important for the customer to know how much, how many calories you're getting from a Big Mac burger.
But more than just calories, like the trans fat, like breaking it. If you can break it down specifically, I feel like that would be like so great for the end consumer to really know what's going into their food. I know that's insanely difficult because this is not a standardized process. Every time you're making a meal, it's a bit different. But so is the calories too. Bless you.
Excuse me. Not coronavirus. But anyway, it's close to an hour mark. Aishwarya's screen has been frozen, but I hope we can still hear you.
Yes, I can still hear you.
Cool. Okay, I just want to wrap this podcast up. I just want to thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
And for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you. It's been Fun time.
Awesome. I'll wrap this up and we can keep talking offline right now. This was episode 2 of the Social Distancing Podcast. I'm Arushi. I'm Sid.
You're Arushi? I'm Sid.
And we'll see you next week.